Hello, and welcome to a series of little talks called Life Lessons from a Lawyer. My name's Peter Hastings, and I've been a lawyer in the UK, England, and Wales, in fact, for over 30 years. But I also have experience in education, teaching, the management of education establishments, and the building of inclusive policies for education for all across the world. So the first topic I want to talk to you about is that you learn as a lawyer is the management and the use of emotions, because we all have emotions, often quite violent or abrupt and strong. But as you probably seen when you've seen films of lawyers in court and talking, and perhaps you have a bad idea of lawyers that, oh, they're just cold-hearted. But in fact, it's because part of the job is trying to manage emotions. The second episode, we're going to look at the danger of certainty. It's an interesting fact that every court case I've ever been involved with, pretty much, has lawyers on both sides, and the lawyers on both sides are telling their clients they've got a good chance of winning. And every court case that goes to trial, one set of lawyers turn out to have been wrong, even though they're experts. And this shows you, if nothing else does, that there's no such thing as a guaranteed case. There's no such thing as actually being certain that you're going to win. How to say bad things nicely, and the importance of saying bad things nicely. Now, in England, we have some old-fashioned traditions when we go to court, and these all allow us to say bad things nicely. The one is that when we're talking about our opponent, our lawyer opponents, we always have to say my friend or my learned friend, which is an old-fashioned way of saying that they're clever. So we never say him over there or that idiot, which we might think. But even if we think that, we have to say to the judge, I heard what my learned friend said, and with respect, I don't agree. A favorite subject for lawyers, which is the question of evidence. And I can start with a little story from English history from what for us was the First World War. And our armies were stuck in trenches, not going very far. And the message came back one day to the generals at the back. And the message was, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. But the message had to be taken back by runners, and the runner would run a mile or so and then pass someone else, and it was passed back. There were no radios in those days, no phones. So it had to go back 20 or 30 kilometers, and it went back slowly, but by many people. And by the time the message reached the base, the message was not send reinforcements, we're going to advance. Their message was send reinforcements, we're going to a dance. We're looking at this episode at the question of justice, which in theory is what going to court, what lawyers are all about. And I'm going to start with a comment which was made firstly by the late Dr. Martin Luther King, and was repeated several times and referenced by another great orator, Barack Obama. And the comment is that the arc of the universe is long, but it tends towards justice. It's the idea that although there's a long bend in the universe, it will end in justice. Now, it's the question of communication. In a way, the law is all about communication. Very often in court, where you will have seen it at work, verbal communication, but often there's a lot of communication, verbal communication between lawyers before you get to the court as well. And I think it's useful to think about how lawyers go about that, because there can be lessons for outside life. Um, One thing lawyers have to do, because they're not talking for themselves, is to get from their clients a clear idea of what the client actually wants. I'm going to talk to you now about the basically the past and the future. So you probably think of lawyers very often going to court and fighting what we call litigation. And this is an attempt really to examine what's happened in the past using usually the documents, emails, and the witness testimony of those who were there, and to try to establish what happened and for the judge to make a judgment. And in civil courts, that is what's most likely to have happened. And in criminal courts in England, it is, did that person do that thing beyond all reasonable doubt? But it's a way of trying to work out what happened in the past, and usually to apportion some blame. Did that person commit that crime? Whose fault was it that the car accident happens? Who is to blame for the marriage breaking down? Who took the money out of the estate when someone's father died? And so on. I'm going to talk now about communication in planning between people for their future. So the phrase I think to use here is to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So lawyers, I think, are often seen as boring and negative, and in a way that's true. That's what they should be, because so if I draft a will for someone and say, look, you know, if you're not here, who do you want to have everything? My son. Okay, that's great. What if your son dies before you, or in the same car accident, or has the same disease as you? You both die in a pandemic. Who's going to get it then? Okay, now my grandchildren. Okay, well they're very small, so who's going to look after them, and who's going to look after the money? So maybe your daughter would look after them, but would the daughter's husband be the man to have the money, or would you be able to trust him? What if he runs off with it? What are you going to do? So it can sound very negative, but the point, particularly with a will, is there's no point doing a will if you're going to leave a gap in it. If in the end the court has to get involved, the government get to get some of the estate when the person wanted to make a will and their will hasn't been carried forward because they didn't think of all the bad things that could happen. And in a way, all legal documents are about what could go wrong. This is why a lease, if you go and take a shop, the lease will be 30 or 40 pages, and a shop is just an empty box. We're going to look now at written communication. Again, a lot of lawyers spend their lives in written communication and trying to transmit to often other lawyers what their position is and what they want to try to say. And it's useful here, I think, to remember something which was written by the great French Enlightenment writer Voltaire when he wrote a letter to his sister. And at the bottom of it, he put P.S. If I'd had longer, I would have written less. Which, of course, is a bit odd because you think he would have said, if I'd had longer, I would have written more. But what he meant was that when he wrote a letter, he would then read it again and cut pieces out. And certainly, if I draft a document or a letter, I almost invariably can make it shorter when I look at it the second and third time. Lawyers can actually help progress things because having the ideas without having someone who can work the rules out isn't really going to work. And this is still going on. For example, there's a lot of pressure in England to change the way that people hold their flats in particular, because flats in England are run by leases and they tend to be unfair. And there's a whole movement to stop this and change it. And I have a friend who's involved in a very different form of owning a property or sharing a property where, in fact, there is no real owner except the people who live there. It's a lease that allows the properties can be sold, but they can only be sold for the same price, basically, plus how much the wages have gone up, not how much the house has gone up. So this stops them being a crazy investment for gamblers and starts making them homes for people. And they have rules, but the rules are about looking after the communal garden, uh, who collects the post on which day, and so on. And these the good ideas come from ordinary people, but the legal framework that this is put into are worked out by lawyers, because they know how the system works and they know how to word a way round it. So I think it's useful to remember that while we have rules and ways of doing things, there is always a scope for change and changing things. And what seemed impossible 5 years ago is now possible. And remembering that the laws are only words that people have written down. And so they're only a reflection of what people have decided to do. And that's, I think, always the case in our personal lives as well. But the change, however drastic the change is, in the end, it's only a reflection of what people have changed in their own heads and their own hearts as to what they actually want to do. If you actually want to change a law, you can do it. And if you actually want to change something in your own life, your own relationships, your own business, you can do it. So there's always hope, even for lawyers. Okay, so that's the last episode in this series. I hope you enjoyed it and taken something from it. I've enjoyed doing it. Hopefully we'll see each other again soon. Thanks very much.